Let's go ahead and get started. So today you guys are in for an amazing experience. You will be hearing from an influential attorney in the state of Florida who has dedicated her life to public service and defending the rights of Florida citizens. Ms. Aramis Ayala is a humanitarian, civil rights advocate, cancer survivor, and former Florida state attorney who is also the first African-American state attorney in Florida. She is also a professor for the University of Central Florida and Florida A&M University. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, a master's from the University of Central Florida, and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. So today you will hear about her journey to becoming the influential attorney she is and her passions that led her to the career in public service. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Ms. Ayala.
So I made it through the first group. I can tell y'all that I have spoken to people across the state. I've spoken across the country. I've even spoken in European Parliament to several people. But middle schoolers are scary. Y'all just are different. And I remember I talked to my sixth grader. I talked to her last night, and she told me all the things not to do. I'll sound stupid. Asked me what I was wearing and all of that. So just know that if you've ever been concerned about speaking in front of people and been scared, that's where I am right now. Big old grown adult was scared to talk to kids, but I'm gonna make it through. All right, so I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about my career, and I see some faces that I saw again, so some of this will be a repeat for you. But I want to talk to you a little bit. Now, I started off last time. How many of you all, I know you guys are all in a law magnet program, but how many of you actually want to be lawyers? Okay? All right, now, how many of you just don't know? You may or may not, just haven't decided. All right, fair, okay. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my career as an attorney, how I got here, and hopefully be able to encourage you to figure out what your next steps are. Because a lot of times when people are talking about our careers, they talk about them by just the title of the job. And that's cool that you may want to be a lawyer, you may want to be a police officer, a judge, a doctor, whatever you want to be, but the question is, what is it about that job that makes you want it? So when I think about my start, I wanted to be an attorney since I was in the 5th grade. I was a 5th grader telling my teacher that specifically I wanted to be a prosecutor. But it wasn't just that job title. What I wanted was truth and justice. You know, I remember being in the 2nd grade looking at people who were being mistreated. I remember looking at the people who were ostracized through elementary school and even in middle school, the ones who didn't get the same opportunities. Those were the things that I was passionate about because I loved equality. It didn't matter to me where people came from. It didn't matter to me what they looked like, what language they spoke, who they liked. None of that mattered because I believed that everyone deserved the same chance. That was my love for equality. I said that I love truth and equality, truth and justice. There are some people who are unbothered by things that are untrue. They get a kick out of tricking people and doing whatever it takes to get what is important to them, even if it is at the expense of their integrity and lying. But for me, I love the truth. Even if it doesn't make me look good, sound good, be the smartest, I love truth. So as a child, me knowing that I love truth and justice, that was the beginning of me saying, I want to be an attorney. I had adults in my life who were helping me understand that. Then I also knew that I loved law and order. I loved the law. I loved education. When you're in your class learning about the law, there's something about it that makes you know that you know something that others don't. Because just knowing the law is one thing, but understanding it and how it all fits together like a cycle, like how when you're riding a bike, how the wheels flow, that's how our law and justice is supposed to go. So I love the idea of law and justice. I love the idea of law and order, and I loved education because I loved to learn information. It doesn't matter, and I shared this earlier today, it doesn't matter what you don't know, it matters whether you still don't know it afterward. And I asked the group earlier today, How many of you have ever wanted to ask a question, but you felt dumb? Anybody? Once again, I will share what I shared. You can either choose to feel dumb or you can stay dumb. Not asking that question means that you don't know that information anymore. But for me, as a child, I was driven to know more. And even as an adult, I still like to learn. It doesn't matter who I learn from. In addition to an 11-year-old, I also have a 9-year-old who will correct me at times. And I've spent enough time learning and being educated that I don't feel crazy when a child tells me something. If I didn't know how to turn this mic on or do something in this room and you said, hey, this is the way, you all may laugh. I'm not going to feel bad because guess what? I just learned. And that passion is what drove me even as a kid. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn what our law said. I wanted that behind me. And the other thing, the last thing that drove me, in addition to loving truth and justice, loving being educated, law and order, I believe in people. I believe in humanity. And that's what drove me, because our laws are in a place where we should use them to help people, not harm people. Whenever you're thinking about the condition of the law, it is important that our laws are not harming people. When you think about all the laws that you study, it is to give people better opportunities and to keep them moving in a positive direction. I love humanity. I love people. And there's not a person in this room who I could not look in their face, have a conversation with them, and see potential in you. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what your mom and dad do or don't do. It doesn't matter what grades you just got. It doesn't matter if you don't know what you want to be. There's something on the inside of me that will connect with something on the inside of you because I believe in people. And it doesn't matter how bad the past is. That's just how I was built. That's how I was born. So my career in the law is not just about being a lawyer. My career in the law is about my ability to fulfill those things and practice what I love. It is about me being able to pursue truth and justice. It is about me being able to understand and embrace education, and most importantly, it is about my love for people and humanity. So how did I get started? After recognizing those things about myself, I finished school, I graduated from high school, and I went to the University of Michigan, and I got my bachelor's degree. I had a lot of fun, but I can tell everyone that all through school, I had no struggles. It wasn't until I got to college that I understood that this isn't about just how smart I am anymore. This is also about how wise I am, how I make good decisions when it's time to study, when it's time to go to sleep, what I should eat and what I should not eat. Should I be in the gym working out? How I should treat people, who I should be hanging out with. Those are all the decisions that I was faced with at the age of 18 when I was getting A's all the way before. I wasn't making the right decisions, so I started seeing grades less than A's. And that was difficult, but I made it through. And eventually, towards the end of my 4-year college stint, I then started applying for law school. And I then applied to law school, knowing that it was going to be difficult as well. But I applied to law school, I was admitted to multiple, and I chose to stay near home, which was Detroit at the time. And I went to the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. I was so impressed with the way that our teachers taught us, and I was able to understand the law. What I was not impressed with is my ability to produce that on an exam. I struggled. I received grades that I would not even repeat in here, even though they're years later, because that was the first time. And I don't say that to discourage any of you from going to law school, because whatever you do in life is going to be difficult. It doesn't matter. Wherever you go, if you say, well, law school is going to be hard, so I'm going to just not go to school, guess what? That's going to be hard too. Like, whatever you do, the adjustment is going to be there. So it's about loving it and pushing through the difficulty. So I pushed through the difficulty of the first year of law school. And then I pushed through the difficulty of the second year of law school. And I started rolling and understanding things and getting a whole lot better. And then real life hit. I had a tumor that was growing in my neck. I was suffocating and dying of cancer. And when I made it to the hospital, to the emergency room, I had 24 hours to live because I was suffocating. That's when I had to realize that none of that mattered. And my career in the law became something more than just me being able to tell people I was a lawyer. It became much more than me having power, than me being sophisticated and somebody. It became about a purpose. And I used my career after that in ways that I'm going to share with you that have nothing to do with what it looks like. It was about what's on the inside of me. So as I'm standing here talking to you all today, I want you to think about not just what your career desires and dreams are, but what is it about those that make you want to do that? Do you love law and order? Is that why you want to be a police officer? Do you love people? Is that why you want to be a therapist? Do you, like me, love truth and equality and want to be a lawyer? Or is it something that I haven't even mentioned? Because it is those things that keep you going when it is difficult. It's those things that will keep you pushing past it when you have encounters, then life deals you a different hand, because it's going to happen. So I had to understand that it was way different and that this meant something. So despite what I had been through, I still wanted to push for that truth and justice. I still wanted my education, and I still wanted to fight for humanity that I believed in. So I finished the chemotherapy, went through it all, very intensive. I had to sit out of school for a year, and that was challenging because I watched everyone move on and I felt left behind. But it wasn't about how I felt, it was about what was really happening. It was my time to reflect. And then after I went back to school, finished the third and last year of law school, I then got back on my feet and I started getting ready to study for the bar exam. Does anyone know what the bar exam is? All right? That's the 2-day exam to become a lawyer. It's 2 days. And when I was studying for that, I realized I was uncomfortable and I was having difficulty. You don't have to remember this, but I was diagnosed with a condition called avascular necrosis. My hips had deteriorated from all of the medicine, chemotherapy, and steroids, and I had to have both of my hips replaced. Learning how to walk again. Once again, delayed in the process. And that was challenging, but again, if I was focused on just being a lawyer, I may have been dissuaded. But because of the love that I had for justice and truth and humanity and education, I was able to push through. So I passed the bar exam, and I went back to my conversations that I had with my 5th grade teacher when I told her I wanted to be not just a lawyer, but very specific, that I wanted to be a prosecutor. And I told her I wanted to be a prosecutor because my understanding of being a prosecution was not just putting people in jail. It wasn't just being so important. It wasn't just having the most level of power in a courtroom. I wanted to be a prosecutor because I wanted to seek justice. It's the one job that I could think of that I never had to feel bad, and my only job was to wake up in the morning and do the right thing. That's why it's not hard for me. That was my only job. I never had to compromise my ethics. I never had to compromise it because I was committed to doing what is right, because I loved truth and justice. So what did I do? I had this whole vision of being a prosecutor, and I started prosecuting cases, and I loved what I was doing because I was fulfilling a dream that I had since the 5th grade. And then something happened. Despite 3 years of interacting with judges who had the highest level of integrity, of loving the law enforcement officers who I worked with, who had the highest level of integrity, of working with other prosecutors who also were honest and forthright, I had a police officer get on the stand and lie. And I was never the same again. It was that one incident that I realized I was in such a position of power that I could destroy someone's life. And I was working with someone who didn't care. I was young, didn't completely understand, so instead of realizing that I could have just been a better prosecutor, I thought that it was meant for me to be a defense attorney. So I went over to the other side. I became an assistant public defender. And when I tell you that job changed me, but also made me, I mean that. Because remember, I told you I love truth and justice, and that's what made me want to be a prosecutor. I told you that I loved education, so I finished through law school. But I also never told you about an opportunity to really fight for humanity and mankind. As a public defender, I fulfilled that. Because this now was where I had an opportunity to represent people who were what people would say the worst of the worst, the lowest of the lowest, that may not deserve a second chance, but I had an opportunity to represent these people who no one believed in. And there were so many times that I would talk to them and they would let me know that nobody's believed in them for their whole lives. Why do I now believe in them? And I would just thank God in that moment that I had something to inspire them. I would tell them two things. And the two things were, number one, you have committed a crime and I can't get you out of this. So there's this thing called consequences. What you have done is place people in danger, and you will have to pay the consequence. But number two, when you are finished serving your sentence, there's still an opportunity for you to do better, for you to be more, for you to think higher, for you to make better decisions, for you to get that job, for you to get that education, for you to get in better groups of people and do better. And I loved my job. I stayed as an assistant public defender for 10 years. Where I started training lawyers. But I wasn't just training them on the law and training them how to practice and procedure. I was also giving them the inspiration to do their job with a level of dignity. Because when you walk into a courtroom with a person who has committed a heinous crime, nobody likes your client. Sometimes they don't even like themselves. Sometimes they have a lawyer for the first time who believes in them because their other lawyers didn't treat them like anything. So it was an opportunity to practice those things that were important to me, but never lose sight of it. And then again, after I had practiced for a period of time, I started thinking that I wanted to do what people want to do in life, and that's make some money. Public service is not going to make you rich. It's going to make you feel fulfilled, which is really, for me, what life was all about. So I pursued a job at a law firm with a civil practice, and I hated it because it was unnatural to me. It was it looked good on paper, and it gave me the image that people think, oh, I'm a lawyer, you walk in and you're so important, but inside I was empty. So that's what I encourage you all to think about. What is it that is fulfilling to you in your career? Because it's not the title. The title is not what keeps you thinking up at night. No one lays in bed and says, oh, I just want to be a lawyer. People are thinking that they want to do something. And let that something be your driving force. So when I came and I decided that civil wasn't for me, I left immediately. I didn't think about what people said. And shortly thereafter, guess what? I went back to the prosecutor's office. Because now I had a different level of maturity, so I can put them all together. Remember, I said I love truth and justice, and I did that as a young prosecutor. I loved education, and I continued to my education throughout my career. And I loved humanity, and I did that at the public defender's office. Now I can come back and do them all as an assistant state attorney. I fought domestic violence cases. I prosecuted sex crimes cases. I did everything with a level of dignity to keep my community very safe. But what I realized is the way that the office was run, the culture of the office was problematic. If you think about someone who you have mistreated, if you think about someone who has mistreated you, the only way that that can happen is because of the way that you are talking about them. You cannot mistreat people you talk positively about. So what I realized as a young prosecutor, more mature but still young, is that the reason we are able to treat people so badly in our criminal justice system is because of the names we call them. We call them savages. We say they're monsters. We say they deserve to die. We say they're pieces of crap. Those are the things that we call human beings. And that didn't sit well with me, who loves and believes in humanity. So I wanted to change the culture of the office. So instead of just working for someone who didn't have those beliefs, I decided I would be that person. When you work for someone and you don't like the way that it is, the office or the business is being run, you got two choices. You can leave or you can lead. Those are your two options. I chose to lead. So instead of being an assistant state attorney, I realized that I was going to throw my hat in and I was going to run for office to be the state attorney. Now in the state of Florida, the state attorney is the person, as you all probably have studied, who makes the determination of every criminal case that is brought. Every arrest, the state attorney makes those decisions and prosecutes those cases, or makes a decision to drop them or divert them. I ran for state attorney, and while I was running, I was interviewed by a newspaper. Then the paper interviewed me. They said, hey, do you know there's never been a black state attorney in the state of Florida? And while for a moment I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I realized I wasn't running to be the first black state attorney. I was running to bring justice and just so happened to be the first black state attorney. Because in this moment, diversity does matter. We can't ever think that diversity doesn't matter. Because what happens is that I joined a club, if you will, of all white prosecutors who had never understood the issues of race from within. They understood the systemic issues of race in our criminal justice system, that there does, you understand, and a lot of our statistics talk about how black and Latinos are disproportionately represented in our criminal justice system. When it's time to get bail, their bails are higher. When it's time for sentencing, their sentences are stiffer. And all of the data also shows is that they have more encounters with police because they live in urban areas that are more policed more frequently, so they have more encounters. Those are some truths about our criminal justice system. And I realized that while I see it from a different vantage point, the group that I was joining may not. So this is why diversity is important. If you take a group of men who are creating laws about women, there's an element that's missing, and that's the voice of a woman. If you have a group of Spanish-speaking people who are English people speaking, who are making decisions about people who Spanish is their first language, you're missing somebody at the table. So diversity brings us an idea where we hear more, we think more, and we are not afraid of the truth. If you don't remember anything today, remember this. Absolute truth must be tried absolutely. What does that mean? That means that whatever you think is the truth, if you can't stand up to somebody pushing up against you, then maybe your truth ain't truth. The reality is, whatever your argument is, you should be able to stand up to it. And when I became the first African American state attorney, it was hard. Because making change and being the first gets a lot of credit, but it is challenging. I often tell people, oh my gosh, you're breaking glass ceilings. And I tell them, yep, got scars all on the top of my head to prove it. Because when you go through the glass, you break it and you get cut. It was very challenging because I was bringing ideas to the table that no one had ever heard of. I was talking in ways that only happen in certain spaces, and they weren't in spaces of power. I realized that I was running, which is something you have to be conscious of when you're thinking about what your career choice will be. Are you making this decision in law or whatever it is to gain power for yourself, or are you trying to gain power to disperse it to the people? I realized that I was trying to give power to the people, but arguing with people who were trying to keep power for themselves. And that was really difficult. So I was making decisions that I stood on because that was my absolute truth and would not go down without a fight. But I also understood there was history. There was a lot of challenges to my way of thinking. So when I wanted to create different programs, when I wanted to give second chances, when I wanted to show that public safety looked a different way, and that getting the highest sentence wasn't always the best way, I received a lot of issues. A lot of people know me for my decision with the death penalty. And I did. I had a very big challenge with the death penalty. But I said what I said, and I can explain to you why I said it. When it comes to the death penalty, in 2017, the level of power that I had, every death case in Orange and Osceola County could not exist without my signature. What that means is that I was the only person who had the signature to make a death decision of whether or not someone dies in our criminal justice system. That was a lot of power that I didn't let go to my head, but I let it work through my heart. And that's a very big difference. So when I realized, and I did a lot of the studying, realizing that it wasn't the right decision and justice, I said I was not going to pursue it. Now again, I said it to the earlier group and I'll say it to you all. Please understand, this is not a discussion to try to persuade you how I think. I teach at the University of Central Florida a class on the death penalty, and I tell my students we don't use the words I feel, we don't say my opinion, we talk about facts. If you have a position on the death penalty, let it be factual. So mine is not the topic for today, but it is based upon my research and information. So when when I'm having this conversation, please, I just don't want anyone to leave here thinking that that's my goal, is to convince you. However, I stand on my position, and I stand on it because of where like for example, the state of Florida, we have the highest amount of exonerations, meaning we get it wrong the most. We, in the entire nation, of all death row, we have had the most people get off of death row because we got it wrong. We also spend $51 million every single year to have the death penalty. Those are some of the reasons that, and that's above a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Those are some of the things that I stood on because what did I say? I love truth and justice. It was never about my opinion. So in the end, I made that decision, got on a first name basis with the governor, which if they don't agree with you is not pleasant, trust me. I also, received death threats. I received a noose in the mail with some very, very stiff reminders of the dark racial history of this country, reminding me of who I was and where I didn't fit in. Those are difficult things. But as I told you guys, I stand on it, and I want you all to remember that if you choose a career because of its title, you can be broken. If you choose it because of what it stands for, you'll last. So I left the state attorney, I decided not to run for re-election, and I was recruited to teach at the University of Central Florida. So I'm a professor now, doing research and teaching classes, and I love my job. The class that I'm teaching, I mentioned it earlier, is right now is a death penalty class where, again, we're not talking about opinions, but at the end of the course, I'm taking my students to death row where they will actually have an opportunity to visit and have the tour. That's what education is all about. So I am now teaching. My career has been one that has been extremely fulfilling. I am 48 years old, which means that I have more time to make it even more fulfilling. But I want to encourage you all today with a couple of things. Number one, be who you are. Don't ever get so caught up in what's going on in your circles to fit in or be cool, because right now, ain't none of y'all cool. Okay, like everyone wants to be, but no one is, okay? Everyone's trying to find themselves. Make sure that whatever you are, but whatever you're feeling privately, in your private time when you're laying down, hold on to that, because that's the core of who you are. If you love justice, if you love people, whatever it is, if you love education, those are the things that you hold on to. And I'll close with this one. Trust yourself. No one knows you better than you know yourself. It doesn't mean you don't take advice. It doesn't mean you don't receive counsel. But if you know the type of lawyer you want to be, if you know the type of equality and justice that you want, stand firm on that. Because things are going to get difficult. And when they get difficult, having a solid foundation that rests in who you are and not who somebody tells you you are, then you stand strong and you make it all the way through. I want each one of you to know that as I close, I promise you, you will make it. I promise you, you're going to do just fine. The legal career that you want is going to happen. If you don't want a legal career, that's going to be fine. Don't let anyone shame you. But remember, it is not the title that you carry, but the heart towards it that you have. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I have built in 4 to 5 minutes for a Q&A. Okay, so if you would like to ask questions, now is the time. What I'll do after the Q&A is over, I'll actually hold you guys in here until we dismiss to go to either a lunch or I think fourth period. Yep. Okay, so then after the Q&A, just sit tight. All right, so let's go ahead and start now.
Yes. Greatest downfall, honey, I'm always standing. And I say that because you have to remember, no matter what it looks like, it's never a downfall. Everything that you go through is for you to get better. It does not matter at whatever. So I have made some decisions that it made think, oh, I should have done that differently. No, there was a lesson in it. So I don't see things as downfalls. I see them as always an opportunity to rise back up and to stand strong. Probably the biggest downfall is ever entertaining regret. Don't ever regret anything. Yes. My biggest, thank you. My biggest make or break moment for me thus far in my career was on the death penalty. And I say that because when it comes to making decisions like that, you have one moment where you can lose your humanity. When I said that I love people and humanity, that includes my own. And the minute that you question, challenge, or destroy someone else's humanity, you lose your own. Yes?
What was the hardest thing for you as a prosecutor?
The hardest thing for me as a prosecutor, good question. I would say thinking that I needed to convince others of my position. You know, I was in the process of trying to galvanize people. I knew what I was believing in was right. I knew the data and the research supported me, but I was apolitical. But it got turned into me being political. So trying to, believing that people really were in it for the good. You know, when you're a genuine person, you often see other people as genuine too. And, you know, again, difficult, but I bounced back. Yes. Yes?
What was, you were talking about the death penalty, what was your decision?
I don't believe in the death penalty. I look at it, and if I'm going to use my signature to decide that somebody dies, it better be some strong evidence towards it being the right thing to do, and I couldn't find any justice in death.
A follow-up question.
Yes.
What was like the hardest decision, like what person took you the hardest to decide?
You mean as a state attorney, a difficult decision? Gosh. Probably leaving office. Leaving office was really hard because I took an oath to do two things: to follow the law and to pursue justice. For me, those two things never aligned. So trying to figure out what to do in the mix of that was very difficult. Yes? Good question. The question is whether or not I had a difficult time as a defense attorney representing guilty people. That's not what you said, but that's what I heard. All right, here's the thing. You have to understand what the job of a defense attorney is. A defense attorney's job is not to get people off. The defense attorney's job is not to make them look innocent. You guys, I'm assuming, studied the United States Constitution, right? All right. Tell me what the Bill of Rights is. Go ahead. First 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, right? That includes Amendment 1, right to free speech. Amendment 2, right to bear arms. The third one is usually about wartime. Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. Fifth Amendment, right to an attorney against double jeopardy. Sixth Amendment, you have your right to counsel as well. Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. Those are the primary ones. When you understand that those are part of your Bill of Rights, the job of a defense attorney is to protect those Bill of Rights. It's not about the person, it's about ensuring that law enforcement doesn't violate those rights, that prosecutors don't violate those rights, and that those rights are not violated throughout the entire trial process. And I have no problem holding the government accountable and ensuring that if they're going to charge someone with a crime, that they haven't committed violations of the law themselves. Yes, in the back.
Would you ever want to go back to your old job as an attorney?
Absolutely not. No, I I say that lightly. There are so many things that I miss about it, but I just don't generally live in the rearview mirror. Like, it had a season, and I loved it, and I learned a lot from it. You know, even right now, I'll tell you, the current state attorney and I have a really good relationship, and she needs some help in some areas. So there's some work that I do, you know, quietly, and I have no regrets on it. But like sitting back in a courtroom, I miss trial work because there's a energy that you get by being a trial lawyer that I don't have right now. So, but prayerfully, something will come and give me that same energy at some point. Yes.
Have you ever in some way that you know is
Absolutely not. That's what integrity is, right? Like, there's no joy in that, putting someone away who you believe is innocent. That is the power of a prosecutor to make that decision, and I don't have any right being a prosecutor if I'm okay with that. A good question. Yes?
Because we see it all the time. We see all the time in films. Like, they'll know a person or feel a person innocent, yet they'll still push back as hard as possible.
Yes, that does happen. That absolutely happens. And being the state attorney was very difficult because I, as the elected state attorney, have 180 lawyers who work for me and who have their own cases. So it is difficult to see if one of them is going to do that or is going to engage in that behavior. But if I find out about it, not only do you do that, do we drop that case, you lose your job. So those things can happen, and it is about hiring people who are interested in perpetuating your definition of justice. Yes?
Do you have an example of a teacher or an educator that made a difference in your life?
Absolutely, Miss Alderton. She was my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher. I still am in touch with her today. She's the person who I first told I wanted to be a prosecutor. So when I was going through a lot of issues publicly and even politically, you know, where people were like, oh my God, what's she up to, who she's working for, it was my 5th grade teacher who was like, no, she ain't working for nobody. It's been her whole life. So having those relationships really matter. Yes? My hiring process? So they apply, we look at their resume, we look at their experience and their genuine commitment to prosecute cases. So for me, I started asking unconventional questions like, what does our system of justice mean? What do you feel a job of a prosecutor is versus others? So it's about asking different questions to get different people.
I'm going to make that our last question because we're out of time, but let's give her a round of applause.